introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Chitran Salveja, and I'm from a mechanical engineering undergraduate degree from Texas,
Okay.
and I'm a junior. Yeah.
Junior? Okay, cool. Um, so as international student, tell me some of the challenges that you faced here at Texas Tech, or even not just from the school, but from the community as well.
Um, Initially, I faced a few problems transiting from one culture to the other, and then from being around my own people to people of different kinds, different races, colors, and everything. But I did not have a problem with that because I've traveled a lot and I meet different kind of people all the time.
Mhm.
But I expected the same
Mhm.
that would happen to me, but I faced a few problems. People looked at me differently,
Mhm.
even when the country says that they treat everyone the same, but because the thought is in the back of the head, they do not sometimes. Some people still look at you differently and will treat you differently.
In
Like
a
if
good way or in a bad way?
sometimes in a good way, sometimes in bad ways. Sometimes
Okay.
they'll be like, okay, you're an outsider and you might not know all the stuff, so we'll help you out.
Mhm.
But sometimes they'll be like, okay, you're an outsider and you're using our resources,
Mhm.
which we should avail, but so they look at you differently and they kind of hit you.
Mhm.
So I faced those problems. And it happened in almost every sector, public sector, at the airports, and it happened while around people of my age, like students of tech, and once with my teacher.
Okay. And whenever you came to Tech, did you have a hard time, fitting in, like, or I don't, just fitting into people who are different than you? To be blunt, like Americans, instead of other international students or something like that. Or do you ever feel like there are times, whenever they don't accept you because you don't look like them, or you don't?
There were instances where it was hard to fit in, but it was only the local people. By local, I mean the country. But when I met internationals, they had the same mindset as me because they were outsiders and they were coming to a new place.
Mhm.
So it was easy to fit in with them because we could relate to each other, all the stuff we went through. But when it came to people around us who were here, it was kind of hard to get in because they were not as acceptable as I thought they would be.
Mhm. Okay. So they weren't really open to just meeting people from other countries and trying to be friends with you.
I wouldn't
Mhm.
stereotype and say all of them,
Mhm.
but mostly a lot of them. But there was one thing I faced. I think it's a normal thing in the whole country that people don't come up to you if you're an outsider and try to help you or make conversation. You're gonna have to do it yourself.
Mhm. Yeah,
But
yeah,
in
yeah.
our country or other countries that I've seen, when
Mhm.
people from outside come visit you
Mhm.
or are studying at your country, people usually go up to them and tell them that if they need any kind of help, they'll be there for
Mhm.
them because, you know, to make a good impression of your place. But I think people here are too practical,
Mhm.
or as in
To
too
individual.
self-involved to
Mhm.
care about all this stuff.
Okay. And then the other thing is, um, since you're Indian,
Hmm.
and in the media, like, I don't know if it's because of the president or just the media in general help portray people of, with certain looks or certain color that, they're a threat to our national security system, blah, 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 things like that. That type of thought that was already implanted into people's minds. Does it ever, like, personally affect you
I
whenever?
mean, isn't the country supposed to be a democracy?
I mean, yeah, but, like, does it ever affect you? Like, uh, is there ever a time whenever people just assume, just because you're Indian or just because you look like, you fit that image of what, the terrorist looks like?
I've seen people making
That.
faces, but nobody's ever come up to me and said anything,
Mm.
fortunately.
Do you think that have, like, affected, in terms of you meeting friends, like American friends here?
Not really, because I've made some American friends,
Mhm.
but most of my friends are internationalists.
Mhm.
Because
No, I mean like American as in not international students, but you know, to be blunt, like let's say white.
like local,
They like yeah, the locals or you know, white Americans, African Americans, you know, things like that.
I I wouldn't be able to say if I've had a problem with
Mhm.
making a lot of white friends because I tried it when I initially came here
Mhm.
and I did not get the like
You didn't
the
share
same
common
response.
interests.
No, we did.
Mhm.
We played and everything happened, but they
Mhm.
were just like in a group of themselves
Ah.
and they separated me
Mhm.
or themselves from me.
Mhm.
So initially when I tried enough and it wouldn't like happen, I wasn't able to make a friend circle for about 6 months my
Mhm.
first semester because they would separate me or ignore me.
Mhm.
And then I tried making friends with people who were interested, who actually wanted to make friends and who were open to people of different races and cultures and color.
Mm.
So that's why I barely have any local friends.
Okay. So would you consider yourself as someone, you know, who's open-minded and someone who is like willing to be around people of different cultures as well? Because you know, for some people, like I'm Asian myself, so it's normal, I guess, that I'm more comfortable with people from, you know, my own culture and my own, I guess, my own group. So would you consider yourself as someone who just stays within that social bubble, or someone who is like willing to, I don't know, just explore and then try to get to put yourself out there?
I am a really outgoing person,
Mhm.
and if I tell you about my friend circle right now,
Mhm.
there's going to be people from all around the world, and not just Indians.
Mhm.
But considering the stereotypical Indian type, you would feel like a person would have only Indian friends, people of his own. That's usually I've seen it. Most of my
Mhm.
Indian friends don't hang out with my, or aren't really friends with my international friends.
Mhm.
But I guess it's just me. But I have friends from Slovakia, Romania, Croatia, Asia, Bangladesh. I can go all night. Germany, Poland. So I guess I
Mhm.
can say I have friends from all over. So I'm really open to people of different cultures and countries because
Mhm.
the more cultures and colored people you know, the more you learn.
Mhm.
And if you're just in a social bubble of people just around, it's like you're making yourself a frog in a well. You don't know the world of outside, right?
Mhm.
I can't be that. I want
Mhm.
to learn more, and
Mhm.
that definitely has made me learn a lot by knowing people of different cultures and countries.
Mhm. Mhm.
Okay, well, it's recorded. Just introduce like your name, your
Yeah.
major, and then where you're from.
Hey, my name's Alex. I'm from Sydney, Australia.
Mhm.
I'm an international student here at Texas Tech University.
Oh, what are you studying? What's your major?
So I study a Bachelor of Fine Arts and Education, and here I'm just doing my fine arts subjects.
Okay. Okay. And then you're what are you? Junior?
I am a junior. I'm in my junior year.
Okay, cool. Okay, that's good. And then just tell me like the challenges that you faced here.
In terms of like politics and stuff.
I mean, it doesn't have to be political. It can just
Mhm.
be like, you know, normal day-to-day stuff like here. You know, did you have a hard time making friends because of, you know, certain cultural differences or yeah, things like that?
Definitely the challenges so far have been like making making enough money and like structuring and budgeting that money and like
Mhm.
making sure I don't overspend and seeing what I can do and what I can't do. I guess the cultural struggles I've had so far is like back home, like I have like a very like high vegetable based diet, and I haven't really had that here, which has been like a main problem because like yeah I'm used to like a certain like consumption of like greens, like a 50-50 based. But yeah, the options aren't as like, you know, wide here. So that's like just like a cultural thing. And saying that though, I've had some pretty good meat and steak and stuff. So it's weird coming here just by myself. I'm used to having like a wide pool of friends back at home and
Okay.
See ya.
Bye.
I'm going to class.
you going to class.
Okay.
Yeah. I'll
Sick.
talk to you later.
No worries. I think like yeah, being here like it's a bit weird being like here alone and not having like that like instant like, oh hey, do you want to go get a beer or like get dinner and like I
Your
can
own people.
you know like I could call my brother, my sister, you know,
Yeah.
my cousins, my friends, like my mum or dad if it got bad, you know, just at home. And coming home and just sort of being alone has been really weird. You know, I have a lot of time to myself, which has been very different. I usually surround myself with quite a few people. You know, making friends has been like a gradual process and gradually building up. I made like a group of friends, but you know, it just takes time to sort of like get close to them and like, you know, meet them. So that's just like another thing.
Okay. So
yeah.
has there been, you know, a time where people are, I don't know, you feel like isolated from people in your classrooms just because, you know, you're Australian and then you're not from here? Or is it the opposite to where like they think, you know, it's interesting that you're all the way from there and they want to get to know you better?
Yeah.
Like, what is your experience like?
Yeah, I definitely think it's more like I speak English, I communicate just fine, and I feel like I'm a personal person. I think there is like a more interest in like, well, what's Australia like? Like people always ask you about kangaroos and koalas and you know the fires that are currently happening in Australia. They're sort of settled down now. But I haven't had any struggle like meeting people. I think I'm lucky because I do speak English and I've spoken my whole life.
Yeah.
My accent may be a bit hard to decipher initially, but I get across like what I'm trying to say, and you know, I'm easy to make friends. Yeah, it hasn't been too bad.
Okay. Well, anything else that you think like you need to talk about?
You were talking about like the Trump administration.
I mean, it doesn't have to be political, but
would it helpful if I?
I mean, if you have been personally affected by certain decisions that not necessarily Trump and his administration team, but just anything that the government make, you know. I mean, if there have been like a personal experience, you know, that was influenced by their decision, feel free to touch it. But if not, then that's completely fine.
I just don't know if there has been anything that has affected, you know, my schooling.
Yeah.
I could talk about stuff back at home, but I don't know if you have some like specific examples. And
yeah, well, okay, for examples, okay, I was going to like some of the questions that I was going to ask Beth is like, you know, does the Muslim ban like, you know, affect number of students enrolling from certain areas of the world like Iran or, you know, Pakistan or something like that, but yeah. I mean, I wouldn't know. Yeah, I don't think like Australia would be affected.
I don't think Australia would be affected by that.
Yeah. So, I mean,
yeah.
which is great, you know.
Which
like,
is good.
Fine,
yeah.
It's fine, yeah.
So, like we're not like, you know, subject to discrimination, but yeah, obviously like I don't agree with that. Obviously like there's a lot of conflict and like, you know, turmoil between the US and Iran, especially right now.
Yeah.
Which would like probably influence that decision.
Yeah. Okay, and then the other thing, one last thing is, so last night I asked a friend who's from India, right, and he said that what he sees a lot is just, I don't know, just like Indian, and then like just an Indian international student just hanging out with, you know, their own group and you know, not really
speak about
like
that.
Living in their little, I guess, like culture bubble even here. So do you have something like that too?
100%, yeah. So that seems to happen not just here but like back home at my university at UNSW is people do tend to stick to their cultural bubbles. And I spoke to a Chinese international student last year, and I said like, oh, like, you know, you got a lot of like Chinese friends here, like And like a bit amongst like my friends back at home, which I've grown up in, like Australia is very multicultural. I've grown up with like Italians, Greeks, Lebanese, Japanese, Chinese, Indonesian, like Filipinos. Like I'm used to being surrounded by that. But she said that she does find it a bit intimidating, like speaking like a new language and like potentially like feeling nervous in those social interactions. And I think it's easier and familiar to stick to those bubbles. And that's definitely like I've definitely seen that, like I've seen big groups of like Chinese people like coming together in Sydney and experience like seeing our culture, and I've seen like big groups of like white Australians just doing their own thing, and I think it just might be that like lack of familiarity and those like little differences in like the way people interact that might like
Do you do that here too, where you just stay with your Aussie friends, or you just...
I don't have a single Australian friend here. In saying that though, I am making a lot of friends that are white. It's different because I'm from the city and I am friends with a lot of like people who are from like rural and country areas, so that's definitely like something that's new for me. A lot of people that grew up on their own ranches and they where there's like I grew up in like a house in the city suburbs, and my dad's an accountant and my mum's a nurse in like a pretty busy hospital, so it's very different, I guess, sort of upbringing. But I feel like I've managed to sort of slip in just fine. And I've played soccer with some Nepalese blokes. I played soccer with a Ukrainian dude, a French man, like over there. Like it's those Europeans that like enjoy soccer as well. It's not as big here, so I guess I've started branching out. But yeah, I have no. I think my predominant group of friends is that are white Americans, but I think it just does just feel more familiar. So it's just easier, I guess. Yeah.
Yep. Okay.
Sorry.
No,
rant.
No, that was great. Okay, it's recording. Can you please introduce yourself?
My name is Tao Chen. I'm a PR major. I'm a junior at Texas Tech, and I'm from Vietnam.
Thank you. So, and you go by Sam, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh my gosh, okay. So Sam, would you tell me some challenges that you faced here as an international student at Tech?
Well, I would say that one of the few issues that I faced when arriving at Texas Tech would probably like the culture. I wouldn't say that I experienced culture shock or anything of that like magnitude. Like it's not that big of a deal for me personally, but I feel that there's a big difference between how like people perceive things in my country and compared to the people's perception here once I arrived. There's definitely some discrimination, some to say the least, discrimination against people of color.
People of color as in anyone that's not white, even Asian?
Yes, of course.
Just had to specify that.
I mean, from my perspective, there are little, opportunities offered to us as people of color in terms of like academics and job opportunities. I once attended a class back in my sophomore year where an instructor would grade students with personal preference, as she would prefer those who were in like sororities and fraternities over regular students who are not part of those organizations.
So you thought like they get better grades just because they weren't
for sure.
involved
I attended her class and I experienced those things. So I would say that there is some discrimination going on. I personally, I just hope that like the school environment is changing for the better, because frankly, it's difficult for international students to just thrive without experiencing like, cultural disrespect or bias coming from professors and instructors. Yeah.
Okay. Do you think that, you mentioned that in your classes some professors are biased and uh, and just favor certain group of people over another, right?
Yes.
So do you also experience that with students around here? For example, like do you have a hard time making friends here that may not particularly be of Asian descendants?
I don't have a really hard time making friends. I guess probably because of like personal experience. I have friends of all, race. If you say so, it's just that there is a difference between how they perceive things and how I perceive things. So of course I can make friends with them, but it's not like I can be like close friends or good friends with them for like the long term, because there's always gonna be some like discussion or disagreement along the way. So that's for me. I don't know about others though.
Do you think they're open-minded to get to know someone from a different culture? For example, like, whenever you meet someone from here, are they excited that you're not from here and then you're from Vietnam, and they are excited to learn about you and your culture? Or is it maybe something that gets them, away from you?
Most of the people that I talked with before, they are pretty interested in my background, and they did show a lot of like respect to where I'm from and my education and why I'm here and stuff like that. But I do know some cases that happened with my friends who are also international students where they didn't get like the welcome that they deserved when arriving here.
And then the other thing is, a lot of us, like including myself, we're more comfortable around people, and I guess
Of
around like other Asians,
of Asian descent for sure.
Yeah, of Asian descent. And are you also like that?
There's definitely a lot of similarities, in terms of like how you were raised. So of course it's gonna be much more comfortable being friends and talking to those who are from like the similar background. It's definitely better. But like, I'm international student. I came here to study, so of course I'm open to a lot of things, and especially when it comes to making friends from people from like another race. So it's great that you get to make friends with like Asian people, but I do feel like I also need to open myself up to more, know.
Okay. Yeah, so at the end of the day, you are open to meeting more people, right? But, a lot of I guess not unfortunately, but the reality is a lot of us are still, just hanging out with people from the same background as us.
Right.
So do you think that even if you want to open yourself out there and put yourself out there, people around you who are, like Americans, do you think they make it hard for you to be friends with them? If that makes sense. There's that clear line between, I think you're interesting and I'm curious about your culture, and like, hey, let's be friends, So did you have a hard time making friends here just because you're different?
I wouldn't say, not for me, but when it comes to making friends, I think it's coming from both sides, not just from like one person. And you cannot really ask people to be like excited for the fact that you are from another country or from another background, and you cannot ask them to be like, like thrilled to be your friends. At the end of the day, it's all about having that, and it's about like other people having that just interest in knowing who you are, and you having just like the open mind to introduce yourself and making friends. But for me, it's not that difficult. But like I said, I definitely know people who experienced culture shock and just difficulties in making friends before.
Okay, so you don't think they discriminate you just because you're Asian, and they think, what will I have in common with that girl?
I mean, not before, because I came here in 2017 and I haven't experienced much racism, discrimination. But as you know, right now, like in terms of the world's issue as the coronavirus, you know that Asians really get a bad rap out of it. Like anyone who looks Asian or perceived as Asian would be discriminated and would be thought of like having the virus, and that's really is racism and discrimination.
I mean, I guess if they use that as an excuse.
I mean, I went to Target the other day, and this white couple, they kind of showed their attitude towards me, so because I'm Asian, so I'm like, yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Do you wanna add anything else?
I just hope that like anyone who's listening to this know that that despite that international students choose to be here, despite that it's their choice, it's not easy for us. It's not easy for us to survive, let alone like live a decent life here, you know. And we just wish for more respect, and that's all we're asking. We just wish that people would be open to all races, to all cultures, and that they wouldn't be so close-minded sometimes. That's it. But thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Can you please just introduce yourself, your name, and then what you do for tech?
Sure. So my name is Beth Mora, and I am the International Student Life Administrator in the Office of International Affairs.
Okay, thank you. So here the first question I have, according to 2019 Open Door reports on international education exchange, the total number of international students reach over 1 million, and is compared to last year compared to 2018, there's a 0.05% increase. So does that same statistics apply here at Tech? Have you seen an increase?
So we are definitely, I think in general, the consensus is we're doing better than what probably the national population is. I mean, I'm not, unfortunately, the person probably to talk to in terms of just some of the data, because that's admissions and recruiting. That's their job to keep a measure of that. But we have not seen, at least from my perspective, on what we're seeing in terms of orientation numbers and things like that, we are not seeing a downturn. And so we're not necessarily growing exponentially, but like you said, given kind of the very, very slight or compared to what had come in the past, I don't think we're having as much of a hit as some other schools have felt.
Oh, okay, that's good
I
news.
hope that answers that question.
That's great, thank you. And this is kind of like the same question. Is it the same for V1 and F1, or is it?
So we just have a lot more F1 students than J1 students. J1, are our short-term exchange students. From what I've seen since I've been here, we just all. I only deal with the student side. There's also something called the J1 Scholar Program. So there's a J1 student and a J1 scholar. I don't know what I don't know what the scholar side is like, but we really just don't focus on the J1 students. We have a lot more focus on our F1 students, and so I don't necessarily think we're seeing a massive downturn in J1s either, but we're also not focusing there.
Okay.
Our focus for recruiting and just the focus of our office is more bringing in students that are going to be here for the long haul.
Okay, thank you. And this one is kind of just about some of the challenges that you see. So what are the biggest challenges for the student? Example, like, do they have a hard time fitting in, or do certain group have harder time fitting in compared to another group? Things like that.
I mean, it's really hard to generalize, and I see groups and I see students for the most part in large settings, so it's kind of hard to say what individual students are dealing with. I mean, I would say in general, international students, wherever they're coming from, are going to struggle with just that in that transition period. And in terms of, I think school can be an overwhelming thing for any student, and then you add in the fact that it's a new system and there's a lot more that's offered on an American college campus than what I think a lot of international students are used to. That's just not the way school works in other parts of the world. You know, school is just school, and there's not like, you know, this entire culture and activities and offices that help you with everything. And so it can just be a little bit overwhelming. So I think that's definitely something that, I mean, I think students really appreciate those services and just the extra stuff that comes with the American college experience. But I think that can be very overwhelming at first, and it's, you know, it can be very hard sometimes to know who to go to, you know, who's can be those points of contact and things like that. And so we really try and at orientation to say, you know, if you don't know where to go, come to us. You know, we are going to be your best advocate. We don't know if you're struggling with a roommate or a cultural issue or with friendships unless you know, kind of reach out to us. And we just encourage them, you know, we try and do a lot of one-off events in international student life that offer opportunities for students to connect to each other as an international student body. They may be coming from totally different parts of the world, but but they can connect over both being international students and kind of knowing what that's like. And so we try and offer a lot of social activities that connect them to each other. I send out a weekly newsletter that exposes them to several, you know, things that I think students will be very interested in and things going on around the community. Try and get them exposed to different activities off campus as well. And then also offer things that we know that students, like you were asking about, might struggle with more than the average American student, which is things like, you know, we've done anti-plagiarism workshops before, and that's because, yes, plagiarism is an issue, and it's something students know about overseas, but if they grew up in if they didn't grow up in the British or the American system schools, they might not know quite to the extent of how much that matters and how much it's watched, and like pitfalls that they might just fall into because they just don't know what they're doing is wrong because they haven't been taught what you know, what some of the nitty gritty of it is. I mean, I've gone to these sessions and gone, I definitely didn't know those things. Like, it's taught me something, and I grew up in the American school system, and I went to college at Texas Tech. So yeah, I think the level of rigor associated with that, and just being very vigilant about making sure they're doing it the right way, and not getting themselves in a place where they're falling into things they shouldn't be doing, but they don't know that they're not supposed to be doing it. And then we also have, like, you know, all international students have to file taxes. And taxes are an overwhelming thing for Americans, much less international students. So we partner with, like, the tax and payroll office to, you know, to get them have a session where they can get their specific questions answered over taxes and things like that. So, you know, we try and look for things that we know are going to be a little bit overwhelming, you know, I learn as I'm further into this job what are some struggles students might face, and then, you know, we try and address them.
Okay, and then this one is kind of like a little bit sensitive, so if you feel uncomfortable, you don't have to answer it. So do you think any students are affected by, you know, the Muslim ban, or is there ever a case where a student from countries like, you know, Iran, for example, have a harder time coming back to the States compared to other Asian countries or even European countries?
You mean like when they travel?
Australia. Yeah, or whenever they go home, or just whenever they even try to come here to study in the first place. You know, have any student ever been affected by certain decision that the
I don't know
makes?
a lot of those details because that's just, I'm not involved in the immigration side at all. I mean, I do know that, yes, as situations change and just the level of, I don't know if the word's background checks or whatever, that definitely impacts students given where they're from. So they just have to be that much more on top of it, probably apply much sooner. And yes, some of them have to be very, they need to come in and talk to their immigration advisor when they're considering, you know, going home and determining, is that something we really want to do? I mean, even something like the coronavirus right now, you know, that has to, if a student was to wanting or planning to go home at this juncture, you know, they would have to ask themselves, is that something I could do? Because I might get stuck back home. You know, I maybe can go, but I can't maybe return. So yes, just given different political situations and relationships that have nothing to do with our students, you know, that's being forged on kind of a federal level and an international level, yeah, that definitely has an impact. It's just hard to say. I don't know of like specifics, and but you know, the immigration advisors are aware of, you know, some of those dynamics. That's part of their job, and they are able to advise. You know, students ultimately are the ones that make the decision whether they travel or they don't, or, you know, process and stuff like that. But there's also, you know, there's programs overseas where, you know, if students are asked saying, I want to study in the United States, no matter where they're from, there's representatives overseas who represent American education system, the American education system, and they're just telling them, you know, this is how long the process is, and this is what it takes, and kind of they're mentoring them through that process. So, you know, that's going to look very different, you know, given where you're from. But it's, you know, I don't think any of them are necessarily in a place where it's like, oh, that's just simply not an option. But that all kind of happens before we engage with them. You know, they're learning from something. I think one of the main groups is called Education USA, and they're typically nationals in those countries, but are representing or work for the U.S. government in some capacity, representing. And I don't know if government's the right way of putting it, because I don't know if it actually is a government job. But their job is to represent the interests of American universities and encourage international students. Because, so yes, I think sometimes the political, the media says that we don't want you here. You know, that seems to be the vibe that's going out. But it couldn't really be less true, because there's, you know, I think there's a lot of work that's going on to encourage international students to come to the United States. We even have a video that we put out last year that says, it's called the You Are Welcome. It's part of, there's actually an international education campaign called the You Are Welcome Here campaign, and Tech's involved in that, because I think students see once they get here that it's really not true, you know, that the lie of, you know, we don't want you here. I think at least Tech is extremely friendly to international students.
Yeah, I can definitely tell. And last but not least, you mentioned, you know, some of the activities that the school as a whole do for them to kind of help them settle and things like that. Do you think, you know, is there anything else that Texas Tech or Lubbock as a whole can do to help them adjust to the culture here better?
Lubbock, like the community, or Texas Tech?
Both.
I mean, I always think there's, you know, more opportunities that we can offer to students. That's the hardest part about my job, is I want to say yes to all the things, and I want to do so much more than I'm already doing. But as of right now, I'm the only person in this office that does kind of this lane of work. And so, but, you know, one of the hard things can be if they're freshmen living on campus, then in the fall there's times where they literally can't be in the dorms, and they can't be in the dorms over winter break. And so those are kind of times that the community seems to really step up and step in. You know, I would love to, we have a cultural exchange program where I think that also can help, because I think one of the things that campus, you know, one of the few things they can't offer in a sense is just that feeling of, I mean, family is whatever you make it, right? And family, friends can be very much family, but sometimes students, maybe they lived in a family where either they lived in the same home or they lived very closely and were kind of doing life next to, you know, multi-generations. You know, they're around their grandparents all the time. Maybe they have younger siblings, and that's just sometimes very hard to replicate. And so we have a cultural exchange program that that kind of helps connect them to a local family and give them some of that feeling if students are seeking that out. But I think in general, you know, Lubbock just, I think sometimes American culture can be like, that's not my business, like, and don't kind of engage. And I don't think it's a lack of not wanting to. I think they just think, oh, I shouldn't. That's overstepping my bounds. And sometimes I think, especially international students coming from different cultures, like that's not considered overstepping, you know, inquiring, asking questions, getting to know someone. You know, maybe you have absolutely nothing in common, but you meet them at the grocery store. Like, you know, and so I think just be, you know, I'd love to see and hope that, you know, some of those just natural interactions are taking place and people aren't afraid to, like, recognize and say, hey, where are you from? You know, are you from Lubbock? And, you know, are you from overseas? If so, where? And, you know, just really be intentional. You know, I think that's what is probably what's most sometimes lacking for an international student is, you know, maybe it's a lot of surface level relationships, but not a lot of, like, I'm investing in you. And so, but, you know, students at the same time, there's lots of opportunities for those relationships to be forged if they kind of put themselves out there. So that's one of the things we talk about a lot, is that, like, you know, it's not just going to happen. You have to make it, you know, you have to be very intentional. You can do the same thing. Because, you know, if you invite them, sometimes they aren't going to be the ones that are going to initiate, but you could be the initiator. And that same, you know, you can create those deep relationships if you take the first step.
Okay.
So we try and encourage them to do that, but ultimately, you know, ball is in their court to a degree. So.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time.